You are listening to the Berlin House Music Podcast. Okay, and we're live.
Hello.
Hello. And we were just talking about SoundCloud. And DJ Fox himself
is in the building.
And had a story about it. Or something to say, at least.
No, I don't have a story. That's the thing. I have a lack of stories about SoundCloud. I haven't really been on SoundCloud for very long. I think, I'm a part of this collective Raiders, and basically like a year ago, I know that exactly because we just paid our second annual membership, like a few days ago. We basically started our collective SoundCloud a year ago. Because we had this gig coming up for CTM at the time.
Yeah.
At Griesmühle, we did this floor takeover, and we didn't have any social media shit to show for anything. We had no way of letting anyone know what kind of stuff we play. Every one of us had like a mix or two out. I think at the time I only had a mix out with like funk and soul and oddball German rare 80s stuff. And that wasn't really representative for what we were going to play, because of course we're a collective that is very much focused on like 130, 140 plus BPM kind of booty shaking music.
Yeah.
So we just made a SoundCloud for that single purpose. We just wanted to put something out there so people could click on a link and see what we would play.
Yes.
And I'm still not that good at putting out regular content there or at any social media for that matter. There's weeks where I'm like really hyped and I do stuff every other day and I make posts and stuff. And then there's months upon months where I don't do anything and feel really bad about it. So I do think, I do really respect like SoundCloud for the utilitarian reasons,
yes.
It's very useful for certain things.
Yes.
But I've also never, there's so many people who use it so much differently than I do. I don't know. I also only really started digging on SoundCloud like a year ago. Before that, I was always only a record person.
Yeah. Well, the thing is with SoundCloud, I think digging is hard on SoundCloud unless you're digging on artists and you go to their profiles and check out their stuff, because I think the general algorithm doesn't always necessarily show you the very related music. So sometimes I would be listening to like my own private tracks, let's say, which go towards house, deep house, and then it just jumps to like trap and like very popular, trap, and I'm like, this is not related in any way. How can this be recommended? I have never listened on this account, let's say, to trap music.
Yeah, I think it's similar to YouTube in a way. Anything that has like below 1,000 clicks, the algorithm that just doesn't really know what to do with it, and it keeps, if you click on something that has like 200 views on YouTube, it will start recommending you like Minecraft tutorials on the side, even if it's like a weird early 90s happy hardcore set, it doesn't have any relationship to anything at all. But I do really like the digging via artists on SoundCloud. To me, like the main digging I do is if a random person follows me, I just click their account and listen to what they do.
Yeah.
And they're reposted and like tracks, and through that I end up finding a lot of stuff.
Yes.
But of course also you get, no matter where you're digging, whether it's like SoundCloud, YouTube, Discogs, wherever, you kind of get into this mindset where, this has like 1,000 plays already. I should look for something else. I'm not here. I'm not the first person here.
Okay.
Which is weird, which is a shitty thing that, especially with records, I had that a lot, that, I would be sort of averse to like popular records. Like I'd see maybe the Supremes album somewhere, for cheap, and I'd be like, what, probably 1 million people have already listened to this album.
Yes.
I want to find that obscure German Schlager LP that has like one boogie track on it, And then at some point you buy the Supremes album and you realize, fuck, this is so much better than any shitty German boogie 80s rare that you can buy for 200 euros on Discogs these days.
Yeah.
Even if it's like a €2 album.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. I think you have general like a big interest for rare records, and records generally, because when I was at your place, your record collection exceeds mine in a big way, and I really like, let's say, the huge knowledge, music knowledge that you have generally, and music history,
I appreciate it.
which is like really inspiring. And I think, yeah, and this is one of the things that I saw actually with Paul also. Paul Zips.
Shout out DJ Zips,
Shout out
the
DJ
one and
Zips.
only,
Yes, former Helmut Kool.
through whom we would have never, through whom we met,
True,
without
true.
whom we would have never laid eyes on each other.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes, and actually I met him. I was basically hanging up some flyers for the first Berlin House Music Party collab at Humboldt Club, at the school that I was at, like the university. And then he was like, "Hey, what's this?" And then we started talking. But he actually put out like a mix back then, which was like only house stuff from a certain year to another certain year in the 80s or in the 90s, I think, from, you know. And I'm like, this is super interesting, as in to have such a specific mix from certain year to a certain year, only in-house music. That's like golden stuff, you know.
Yeah,
So
man.
I was very inspired, and I checked it out, and this is, I think, how we got more in connection. And then, yeah, we met. The point.
Yeah, man, those were the days, definitely. But yeah, he was also actually the guy who got me into DJing at first. Like, I was already buying records for a long, or ever since like maybe since 8 years or something, since I lived in Amsterdam.
Okay.
And but at the time I was also only looking for like that obscure shit, you know, like the breaks and the funk and the weird looking records that look like they don't have anything interesting on them, but they do. And through that I bought so many uninteresting records at the time. But whatever. So I was only buying like sort of 70s, 80s, 60s funky stuff
Yeah.
for a long time, and at some point started buying like a few house records, like one or two here and there. And then I had decks at home, but they were super terrible. I was living with my man Young Lichi at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we were using these extremely fucked up reloops that he had gotten from a friend for like a fiddy, both of them together.
Okay.
And it was just sort of, they had like massive cigarette burns, and the motors were so slow, like if you would cue a record it would be like
Okay.
like really fucked up. And our man Zips, he had a dope setup, like great great turntables and everything, and he was also a mate, of course. And so we started playing records regularly at his place, and he taught me how to mix. Like I had no idea how to properly mix.
Yeah.
And yeah, without him I definitely wouldn't have ever like played anywhere. I think even I don't know, like the first gig I ever played was sort of with him, but wasn't through him, but also the connection to you happened at the time. And then I think I don't know if we played together at a night. No, I played together with Ali at another night.
But you played together with Zips at I think it was the first relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Was it at the canal?
Loftus Hall.
At Loftus Hall. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, man, that was good.
Yes, but that's the thing. You guys together have like such a nice, super nice vibe, an active vibe, and super positive. And basically, this is one of the great things of let's say Paul's or Zip's DJing style. He really interacts with the people and makes this contact, let's say like eye contact, and just makes people dance basically. Start shaking, and then people, before you know it, all dancing. And it creates such a nice atmosphere that people feel welcome and just motivated to dance.
Yeah, man, definitely seeing him play a few gigs definitely showed me all the things that belong to DJing. Of course, you know, he's a perfect technically DJ, you know, like mixing absolutely great records into each other perfectly. But also he, as you said, like he has this kind of special something that makes the difference between like a good DJ set or a DJ who plays good tracks and actually a DJ set that gets people riled up, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, man, I mean, I think he's gone a super great way as well with playing like completely, or not completely different records to what I play now, but now he's of course a big trance guy now. which I'm not so well versed in compared to other genres maybe,
Yeah.
because I went at some point to super fast.
Uh-huh.
But I still think like he always digs up these extremely obscure great records that no one ever really heard of, and yeah, great DJ, man. Check him out, Zips.
Yes.
Wait, let me quickly do some ASMR.
Do it. Take
Hold
your time.
on.
You can hear it. The sound of the start of the weekend.
Oh yeah, cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Yeah, man. At the time, when we were playing, like I was still playing like a lot of house with him. Not that I've moved beyond it. I still really like house.
You better. Just saying.
I know. It's like through the fact that we did the Raiders thing. Sometimes now I find it sort of I have a tough time when I buy new house records. I don't really know when I'll get to play them. But I've been wanting to make like some more house sets again recently, just because also, of course, when we started out like sort of a year ago and we did the releases or the first release, it felt like there was like a void that we were in, or that we were sort of hitting. Of course, there were always labels that put out the stuff that we put out, or DJs that played the stuff that we did. I mean, we're obviously far from the new. It was more that we were riding a wave that was happening, or that was beginning at the time, and it's still going strong and great, But at the time, it was definitely it felt so new, and now there's definitely a lot of other people also who are popped up alongside us.
Yeah.
That do really interesting and fantastic stuff. But so sometimes you feel the want to sort of maybe do something unexpected for once. So I was definitely hoping to whip out some of these house records again.
Yes.
At some point. There's also a great release. I don't know the name now, but that came out recently, of people who basically did like 160 BPM edits of classic house and 2000s electro tunes, in the sense of not electro in the Afrika Bambaataa sense, but like in the maybe Ed Banger kind of sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's banging. That's a great combination. Also, like people like DJ Swisher or Sherelle, who I incredibly respect. They did some amazing like edits of sort of, like I remember we saw Sherelle at Panorama Bar as part of CTM, and she played this insane 160 BPM Deep Inside remix. That was just so banging. That was the best time I've ever had in this building.
Nice. But 160 BPM at Panorama Bar though?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah, man. And that was a crazy night generally. I came in, I don't know exactly who else was hosting that night, I think it was a collab, CTM X. I think maybe it was Sarah Farina's collective, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
Definitely curated by our main man, Opium Hum,
Okay.
aka Boiler Room Guy. And he always curates banging people. Like he curated us, of course. So he got us on board for CTM Festival at the time. And he was among the people who did the booking for that night. And I will never forget that. I came into the room, and on the main floor there was like a GABA 180, 190 BPM remix of Gasolina playing.
No.
Yeah, man. At Berkheim. That was amazing, man. That was beautiful. That was a great night. And then later, I think Sarah Keen played back to back with someone else who was great. That was a great night.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Wow.
As you can already hear, I've gone down the rabbit hole of becoming faster. Also, with producing music, I started out on like 80 BPM kind of chill trip hop vibes.
Yeah.
And then just went faster and faster. And now I've gone back to doing like 110 BPM kind of, 120 BPM.
Good.
Chill stuff. And yeah, but I don't know. It's either really fast or medium fast.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's always the thing. Generally, the interest also shifts. I feel generally that they're like breakbeats a lot more popular than it used to
Hmm.
be a couple of years ago. Um, but yeah, also a lot of DJs just explore a lot of genres basically. Um,
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I also, when I was talking about the wave, of course, I didn't mean it diminishingly. I think that that it's, especially also being someone that digs a lot of old records, these waves are just real. You know, they're just a fact. Also, like I always have to remember this conversation I had with one of the people who run Mr. Bongo. You know, like this sort of big UK reissue label that does a lot of reissues of Brazilian like 70s, 80s stuff,
okay.
60s stuff as well, like Brazilian psychedelic rock and whatever. And this guy was talking about how like he and some other people from the label had gone to Brazil loads and loads of times because especially like in the 90s, you know, when it was like the Café Del Mar era, people
Yes.
were big on like MPB, like Música Popular Brasilia, you know, like sort of semi easy listening but still very nice stuff, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and that was such a big thing at the time, and then people got more into like the breaksy side of things, you know, the like Brazilian funk, Tim Maya, and this kind of area that I also really love. And they, at some point, they felt like they exhausted the amount of, or the records in Brazil almost, you know,
Yeah.
like they had gone there so often, they had bought so many random records on a hunch, they had found so many insane grails, you know, stuff that was pressed like a couple of hundred times, and then there was a flood in the building, so there's only like 5 copies left, and they found them
Oh
all
shit.
of this kind of stuff, you know, like the kind of funky breaks, psychedelic rock area of stuff. And then at some point, people started, you know, pivoting more to like boogie and disco and the stuff that they had before found cheesy, you know, because of course when you're like a cool hip hop breaks digger, then you're not gonna listen to a boogie track. You're not
Yeah.
gonna be like, oh, Marcos Valle, who is that? And so at some point they had to basically reevaluate their entire thing and had to go back to Brazil to find all of these new records that had now become sort of interesting again to people and to them as well, because these waves are just kind of real, you know. And I
Yes.
think in a way that's also cool. Like you don't, I think people talk about trends and stuff in such a negative way often, and I think especially with electronic music, um, it's not negative, you know. It's there's of course in the end there's only so much you can do with a 707 or a 909, and if people go from like if at some point there's like a revival of like late 80s early 90s tracks music acid house,
Yeah.
and then there's a revival of like happy hardcore, and then maybe there's a revival of like I don't know, Mr. Oiseau type 2000s stuff, and then there's a revival of like mid 90s amazing deep house, you know. Then that's amazing. But also on the other side, I respect all the people who just stay on certain things, you know. Like for example, I know ever since we've known each other, you've been like someone who's just an amazing head about house music, you know, and
Yep.
deep house and new deep house and old deep house.
Yes.
And you know, I think that's amazing as well. Like I feel like I'm I'd love to also be just so like focused on the genre sometimes, which I mean in an extremely positive way.
Yes,
You know?
yes, yes. No, I understand totally. Yeah, I went through a lot of genres basically with production. Also, I don't really limit myself in releasing. That's a different kind of
Hmm.
story because I think it also becomes very hard to release, let's say, other stuff if your whole world is just house and all house related. But generally, I really somehow landed on house. Like that was the home thing because when I basically moved to Berlin, I really thought that I was gonna go techno
Mm.
because I was kind of also listening more to that and really liked it. But somehow I just really landed on house music.
No, but
Um,
I can totally understand that. Also, the thing is, I guess if you go to Berlin and you don't just want to sort of be only like someone who goes to parties, but you also want to like participate in a scene. The techno scene is just so big already, and I mean I don't mean that in the sense that you find a niche because you want to make a successful party, but it just exhausts itself for after a while. You know, like you don't want to, like you might end up doing a techno party, but obviously it's not gonna reach the level of some other techno parties. You know, and you're not gonna get techno DJ X because they're obviously playing at another party. And I mean, but it's still, as I said, I don't mean that in the sense that you adapt to that, but it's still, I feel like subconsciously influences you maybe that, you know, you have this complete presence of like the minimal techno and Berghain techno and all of these different facets of techno, and then you hear like a nice 90s New York house strictly rhythm record. You're like, why? Hold on, why is no one playing this?
Yes.
And so I think that it makes you more eager maybe to contribute that to the whole thing. That was how it started with us as well. That, you know, we just wanted to make a party where we played like classic Chicago ghetto house, you know, and juke, and Baltimore club, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
And there were nights that did that occasionally, and there were DJs that included that in their set, but it didn't feel like there was like a regular night or a collective that had really subscribed primarily to that. And I can imagine maybe it was similar for you with the house parties to an extent. I mean, house is of course present, but house has so many different facets or so many different faces. Like, I guess you hear a very different kind of quote unquote house if you go to Carta Blau compared to like an obscure party where you get Mr. G to play or something.
Yes, definitely. There is a huge difference in house, and yeah, I think like music-wise, Berlin house music tends to have the same kind of warm vibe or feeling. But that's not all the house there is. There is a lot of house.
Yeah.
There's like
It's
the
a
minimal
big
house, you know. But
Yeah, man.
But yeah, like the minimal house scene is also huge, and I think Berlin is very popular as well. And I think it's getting more popular because I think I was looking at the other day also at the Beatport charts, and one of the more minimalistic, like minimal house tracks was on number 1.
Oh, really?
I was like, hey, wait a minute, this got
And
interesting.
I have been, to be honest, I have been waiting for that for like a few years, because I, over the last years, had the privilege to work with records, like secondhand records as well. And
Yes.
From going through collections and listing them for sale, not that I personally am a Discogs shark, but just from working with records, you do realize that there's so much also extremely good stuff from like the minimal house, tech house era, and it's all just incredibly cheap. You know, it's all just extremely available, incredibly cheap, and this is usually, of course, the kind of starting point for things to get to, you know, start getting their renaissance, kind of almost, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I remember a buddy of mine telling me how in the 2000s he would always buy these sort of new age ambient collections, you know, because no one wanted to have them at the time because all of the records were just completely unsellable, you know.
Yeah.
And now these days, all of these innovative communications records and whatever, they're sought after, you know. But just because people have started to play them again because they're findable and have caught on to it. But that was also one of the ways that I got into house, actually, was also because I really like. I came from hip hop at the time, so I really like sort of the 80s hip hop vibe, you know, with like a drum machine and you know, the also the Miami bass sound I really enjoyed later.
Yeah.
Like the 808, whatever, love it. And from that on, I actually went to like Chicago hip house of like late 80s, because that was a kind of house that I got as compared to maybe, you know, the Ricardo Villalobos type of minimal whatever that I didn't really understand at the time, and I didn't like it because when I was growing up, all the people that were going out while I was staying at home or somewhere smoking weed and listening to like indie rock, you know, those were the associations at the time. So I started getting into like the late 80s and early 90s house stuff, and that's just the thing is, if you go to the flea market or you go to secondhand record shops, and you want to just not spend a lot of money to find a lot of music, so you can like go through it and find something you like. There's always a lot of house, or regularly there's quite a bit of house that you end up finding, because there's so much obscure late 80s, early 90s house from like the first acid wave and whatever that also people in Germany were making. And they're like, you're obviously not going to find like a first press Rolling Stones record if you go to the flea market at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
You know, but you are gonna find some weird house maybe that all of these 60-year-old rock heads have never heard about, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also the concept a bit of affordable housing.
Yeah, man. Affordable housing. That's, I think, half of this I've already said in that video. But yeah, the mix series, I'm also still keen on us continuing, definitely.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, affordable housing is a project by you, and I'm also contributing to an extent.
To be honest, it is 100% your idea, but we made it into reality together,
Yeah.
basically.
And the idea is behind it is for a DJ to make a mix in almost only with really affordable records, like records that don't take a lot of money to buy, and that might still be kind of hidden. And then there's also, of course, the video side of things, which is like an interview where people talk about digging and finding records and everything. And yeah, I still think that's a great idea. The funny thing is, obviously, it had nothing to do with my mix, but just to reference to all of these obscure things that are slowly getting out. I still, the other day, looked into my list on Discogs that I did with affordable housing records for the first mix. And a lot of them have gotten expensive. Like, obviously, independently of me playing that, I'm not saying like my 1K play mix made them.
Well, could be.
Well,
It's very specific, and the target audience is not too big. So
it's true. There's like 5 copies for sale on Discogs for like €3, and 5 people who hear it buy it. But either way, I still think that I mean I guess the purpose is less of the series to show. This is an obscure record that I found, and I'm such a great digger that finds all of these amazing forgotten records. But it's more to say that there's this vast amount of records that no one knows, you know, or that few people know, or some people might know and haven't heard in a while. But as I said earlier, you know, those records change from the way the listener changes, you know, like you might have listened to a record 10 years ago, and now it's going to sound completely different to you. And there's this vast sea of released music out there that you have to kind of wade through. So
yeah,
people gotta do their own digging.
exactly. And I think it's very fresh and nice to find, let's say, records in such unexpected places. Because for me, it's always okay. You go to the record shop, you can find stuff online, but to go to a flea market to buy records, that's dope. That's super dope. And that was also the interesting thing, because you worked also for HHV, the record store in Berlin. I think that's super interesting, because this is like an actual insight of a record store, about buying and selling like physical.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely. It was at the time when I applied to these kind of jobs. It was also super interesting. Like, I was so interested to see how it goes on. Now, of course, I've gotten used to having sort of secondhand records in my hand all the time.
Yeah.
But I still think it has some magic, and I'm really glad to be there selling people records. Then sometimes you're gonna just take a walk and look through records.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's of course, but that's also to be honest, that's something. This whole price thinking is also a bit of a, not disease, but definitely a sort of thought pattern that also I want to always get out of my head, especially because of the affordable housing approach. You know, the fact that a record doesn't need to be sought after or expensive to be good, and it's so much more rewarding sometimes to find like a €1 record that no one cares about that you really like,
Yes.
as opposed to finally getting that one rare Moody Man edit for €150 on Discogs, you know.
Yes. Oh, you went there.
No, not to shit on Moody Man, but
Oh, we talked about this actually a bit before. We're having a
But
conversation.
I can say I did recently sell a Moody Man record for like 200 euros that I didn't think was worth the money at all. So
But I think it's also like it's just an indication how many people want this stuff at that time, and that shifts over time.
yeah, shit. I mean, also of course now I sort of feel bad because I revealed myself as a bit of a shark. But in the end, I was still on the very very low end of people selling this.
Yeah.
Gotta say, for all the haters writing comments already. And
No, but I think with records, you're a fair price dude. You just genuinely interested in records, and you do that kind of thing, and I think that's very nice, because if you think about the margin of like actually making money off records, it doesn't exist. Nobody
No.
ever got rich selling records. You know what I mean?
I mean, in the end, the shitty thing about this whole reselling business is, of course, that no matter how sought after a record gets, the artist won't really see any of it. Like all the people who will trade the record back and forth are like random people who happen to have the record. So unless the record gets a reissue, in which case, of course, the artist gets money from a reissue label. Ideally, I mean, there's of course bootlegs, which is a whole nother subject.
Yeah.
But overall, this whole record trading thing sometimes feels a bit detached from the actual music. Like there's just sometimes these labels and artists that are sort of sought after that people also just buy because I know so many people who just buy 2 copies of things because they're like, yeah, this is definitely gonna get expensive and I want this, but I also maybe might want to sell a copy in the future.
Okay.
And but overall, of course, also given that I work in this field, I feel like the ethical questions. For example, today actually I read a Facebook comment in like a Facebook group because I still use Facebook because I'm an old man. But yeah, so sometimes you can make incredible bargains on Facebook groups for records,
Yes.
because especially in some areas, like also with hip hop, for example,
Yeah.
people are just have this hate on like resellers, and I get that. Like I think in a lot of ways, I hate it when I'm too late for a record, like a record I really like has come out and I didn't buy it timely, and then it's like, oh fuck, these suckers that only sell it for 200 euros. I really want this Moody Man record,
Yes.
And I totally get that anger, but as I said, overall, I still think this whole price shit is often unnecessary. I don't know if I've ever really spent more than 30 euros on a record, even though if I had a lot of money, I probably would have. But there's like at the point where a record is so expensive, just go on SoulSeek, just get a rip or find someone who has it to give you a rip.
Don't get a rip.
Oh no, don't.
This is the thing. So here's the thing. The rip is that's what's kind of, we still need, let's say, the financial side of things in the branch for the branch to survive generally, to be able to have the club, to be able to have this culture. And rips are maybe okay to listen to, I totally get it. If the record is way too expensive, then it's just hard, especially if it's not in your financial means to get it, then it's not going to be possible because you have to pay the bills. And let's say if your rent is for a room, especially let's say as a student, this kind of thing, around 400 euros, 200 euros would be half of your rent.
Yeah.
So it's a huge consideration you need to make to spend that money on a record. But yeah.
I mean, I think also it can be really valuable for musicians and labels if that kind of thing happens to their record, because of course you have so many labels where you can see that their first record or second record or whatever, they're a part of their catalog just got really sought after, and then people are of course more eager to buy the record once it comes out because they don't want to be in that position. They don't want to be in the position that the record is sold out and shit, now I gotta buy it from some random reseller. And overall that's of course beneficial for the label because you don't want to sit on like records forever,
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I still think this whole affordable housing thing just shows you that there's so many records that just weren't in demand once they came out, and on the other hand, there's so many records that you click on them on Discogs and you see that they're sort of expensive, and then you listen to them and you're like, what? I don't really get this at all.
Yeah.
And their hype might have been sort of a very immediate one, but in the end, of course, it's the test of time that clarifies how good your music actually is. And I'm
True.
just, I have never put out a record, of course. Like I've put out music, but I've never put out a vinyl.
Yeah.
And I just really want, if at some point I put out a record in some context, I'm just really hoping that at some point someone will stumble upon it on the flea market somewhere, or in a shitty secondhand shop, or like an antiques place in between like furniture and everything, and just buys it, a super scratched up copy, and then it's like, oh, this is pretty nice.
Yeah.
I wonder why this is only a €2 record.
Well, yeah, but you should definitely put out your own record, because I remember you sent me like 4 tracks, I think 3 years ago, 2 years ago, like around the time we first met, and that was good shit, you know.
Yeah.
And I think since then, only been like, I think you can hear in your music that it also has music history in it.
I appreciate it very much. Yeah, that's of course a difficult part of it as well, because especially when I started out, I used a lot of samples all the time, just because I needed to retroactively make sense of me buying all of these weird, easy listening records.
Yes.
So I sampled a lot of stuff, and that of course sometimes makes it more difficult to think about, should I put this out? How should I put this out? Is this actually safe? I mean, not to say, of course, ideally you get in touch with the original artist and you clear the sample.
Yes.
But I feel like, I'm not at that point financially where I can actually afford that,
Yes, and I think a lot of labels are also, some labels don't exist anymore, and it's
Exactly.
really hard to get in touch with labels.
Exactly. And also, for example, if you have this obscure label from the 80s that put out a tune, and then at some point their catalog might have been bought by Sony, then they're going to charge Sony rates, even though it's an extremely obscure track. They're going to charge the same rate or a similar rate, I guess, like when you want to sample another popular tune of them. So it's difficult to do that as an extremely small artist.
Yeah.
And overall, of course, I'm kind of with a lot of like hip hop artists who generally see the digging itself as kind of you putting in the work, and that being kind of, and sampling something being like your work and not necessarily the work of, like, I'm not really sure if I'm fully with that, but I do think that it, like if I find an extremely obscure record, I mean, these days what I do is to just try and sample extremely obscure records, the stuff that was never really on a label to begin with, like sort of privately pressed school records from like the early 70s, and that kind of shit, where you can, I guess, sort of be certain that nothing's going to happen. But sometimes you just want to sample, touch it, bring it, pay it, work it, turn it, leave it. You just want to put that on a track, and it's sometimes, of course, difficult.
It is definitely, but this whole copyright thing, it's a very interesting topic actually, and I have been dealing with it also on SoundCloud, because basically, the producers would send in their submissions and I would upload them. But if the copyright in the track is not owned by the artist and I put it on SoundCloud, I can get a copyright strike, which I did on one track, which was released on a label, and the artist didn't know basically that he couldn't sample this much of a track, but the label did release it without knowing either. I ended up uploading it, and I couldn't dispute the copyright claim, or the copyright strike, basically, because I didn't have the permission of the original artist to it, and the original artist would be the people who made the original track. And so that is an issue, and a lot of tracks have been taken down generally. So I am also trying to find a way to basically communicate that to the labels and the DJs to check their tracks, so I can upload them safely.
Yeah.
But the rules are very vague about this.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the end, of course, like the whole ethical side of it is also often just a question of like, I don't know, power hierarchies and stuff. You know, for example, we had this conversation a lot. Given that with Raiders we do a lot of booty shaking music, there's of course so much. Like there's all of these amazing original Dance Mania tracks from the 90s and all of these fantastic Chicago tunes that have all of these nasty, beautiful vocals, you know? And in this whole scene that we're a part of, it's just extremely common, or was also extremely common for a long time, to just straight up sample these these original vocals, you know, and to just put them on a new beat that
Yes.
and that sort of sounds vaguely similar. And a lot of people got pretty successful with that. And from people who are connected more to the US, you do hear, of course, that the original artist, like a person like DJ Dion or whatever, not that I heard from him personally, just as an example for a big original ghetto house artist,
Yeah.
that they were that they don't like that, of course, you know, because they recorded these things and then they get sampled and they don't get credited. And of course, a lot of these people, you know, they're big names to me, they're icons to me,
Yes.
and to many other people, but they were and are still part of this niche genre kind of stuff. They might have been at the time in contracts that didn't really account for the kind of digital stuff that's happening and sampling maybe even, you know, and as a result of that, they don't really get paid enough for the amount of you know, impact they made and for the amount of playing airtime that their tracks still get, you know.
Yes.
So I think, especially given that, you know, the kind of up tempo booty music scene here in Europe that we are kind of a part of, is also very much sort of white, you know, to a large extent, and not necessarily from an affluent background, but still, you know, we don't. It's not the south side of Chicago in most places here.
Yeah.
I do think that in that instance, it's sort of whack to sample the original stuff. And I say that as someone who has also done that, you know, and who has reflected on that, and looking back regrets it, you know.
Yes.
But on the other hand, I think it's totally legit to sample like a random shitty German easy listening record from the 60s, you know. I'm not gonna feel extremely bad about James Last if I take a loop from, you know, a shitty polka record, you know.
Yes. Yeah, well, I think it's also in how you sample it. So, for example, what I noticed with the MPC, generally what I like is to take a certain note or a certain sound that's in a certain key, but then like go, let's say, down on the pitch, because you can go down to 120, like on the MPC. And that's, I think, what was it, 200? No, I think it's 100 minus 120 and plus 120. Anyways, or 1,200. I'm unsure now. Anyways, you basically get a whole different sound. And then you can load it into the pad. So you have like 16 keys that all have like different notes, but you're going all the way low. And it's just like one note. So then you create kind of a new, like a new song out of one sound from like a record.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting way of sampling. And I think a lot of the old school hip hop productions, like instrumental hip hop beats, that's kind of the way, that's the approach basically. You
I
just
guess-
get like the very small piano sample. You pitch it down or you pitch it up, I think mostly down.
I guess that's the DJ Premier approach, as I'd call it. You know, like, I mean, I still am a big fan of looping. You
Yep.
know, but in the last year, definitely, I've also started looping so much less than I did before. Like, I used to back in the days make music that was basically just like 6 loops on top of each other. You know,
Yeah.
like one jazz track, another funk track, another library track, a drum break, and it would sound like somewhat interesting, you know.
Yeah.
And now I'm usually, often what I also do is to just start out with a sample that has like an interesting melody progression, build everything else around it, then take out the sample. And also what you were saying, just to sample like a little bit, as I said, I've really been into rave music, you know, like the last year or two. I like started out listening to a lot of jungle, then went sort of a bit back in time to like original UK hardcore, breakbeat techno, Frankfurt shit,
Yeah.
and now also listening to quite a bit of like later 90s happy hardcore. I'd say like 1 out of 10 happy hardcore tracks I dig. But the thing is that I really always wanted to find out, damn, how do I do these stabs? You know, these like
Yes.
nice
Yes,
rave
yes,
stabs.
yes.
And it's somewhat I just realized, okay, I can just take any like half a second or a few milliseconds from like any track, you know, like could be a funk track, could be a synthesizer track, could be like a library track.
Yeah.
Just anything that's sort of harmonically a bit interesting.
Yes.
Take that, put some reverb on it, sample it, and you get a rave stab.
Exactly.
Maybe distort it a little, and bada bing, bada boom. There you are.
Yes,
It's-
and definitely. But the funny thing is like if we look at the like the Groovebox MC505, it has stabs programmed in it,
Yeah.
and so I think a lot of those tracks also came from around there too.
Yeah.
So, and that's an interesting question then, because the actual like a lot of the presets that were sampled,
Mhm.
like on the all synthesizers, those at the end made the hits of that era.
Yeah,
And if
for
they then get resampled though, then it's like a copyright issue. But it was on the
Mm.
machine, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a super interesting topic, and generally, I'm also very much like I love 808 sounds, for example, and of course they don't sound fresh anymore the way they might have sounded in like 1987 or 1984 or 1983 or whatever.
Yeah.
But they still sound. I think the way that they sound has changed to us, you know, like because now if you hear like an 808 cowbell or a fat 808 kick, you don't really hear it as like a cowbell. You hear it as a sample almost, even though it's like the preset, you know.
Yes.
It's like a reference to all of these amazing tunes that have come before it.
Yeah.
And I think it's similar with the presets, like our man Ali, aka Baba, who was the second guest on Affordable Housing.
Mm-hmm.
He showed me all of these. He's like a synth head, definitely, and he showed me the synth that he got. I don't really remember what it was, but
I think it was filmed also in the second Affordable Housing.
yeah, I don't know if it was the one that he had already in the video or if it was one that he got later. Oh no, I think it was the one in the video, but he just went through these presets and showed me like the house tunes, the Italian 1992 house tunes with like Beach Rimini dancing vibes that used this exact preset for their stuff. And I think that's like I love this intertextuality of electronic music, you know. I think that's a good thing and not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not really a guy who's like who wants everything to advance, you know. We don't all need to listen to like deconstructed grime now or as much as I love a Fatma Al-Qadiri records or something like that, you know, we don't all need to listen to futuristic experimental music, because if you go to a party, then a simple 4/4 beat is gonna do something to you that experimental music won't, you know. It's gonna fill the need that you have at the time, and I feel like the fact that it goes through waves and that you had this sort of lo-fi house thing a few years ago that might have introduced people to this sort of Rhodes mid-90s deep house sound
Yes.
that they probably wouldn't have maybe otherwise heard if it wasn't for Winona or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. And I mean, I think you can definitely also be fed up with this whole cycling through old genres and recycling them all the time. But to me, I think that something gets added every time. And like, if it wasn't for some of that stuff, I wouldn't have found certain other tunes from that time, you know. If it wasn't for Motor City Drum Ensemble, I wouldn't have listened to like a lot of great disco tunes, for example, you know. And in that sense, you know, I feel like this whole we get back to this cyclical thing. I think it's dope. I think it's great. I love it. I just don't want breaks to go out of fashion. Then I'm ruined.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Fashion, it's the same, you know. Like also goes and comes in waves.
Exactly. You're not gonna reinvent shoes.
Nope.
Oh well, maybe watch me.
Well, I've seen those shoes that basically kind of look like socks that people wear.
What do you mean, like Yeezys?
No.
That was a subtle Yeezy diss.
Oh shit.
Uh,
No, it's like literally like almost like socks, but they have this profile on them, you know, like a kind of a for the grip. But they really look like socks, but people wear them as shoes, and they seem like very functional. And that was super interesting. It was like, because it looks like they're almost walking bare feet.
Man, you know what I'm also fully for? Rehabilitating Crocs. Crocs are great. I mean, you saw it with Birkenstocks. You know, Birkenstocks used to be like the most. It's like Jägermeister. You know, Jägermeister as well used to be this extremely old people thing.
Yes.
And I remember when I was younger, my grandma would sometimes take me to the Birkenstock outlet shop.
Okay.
That was sort of like an hour from where we lived, and she'd get me some new Birkenstocks.
Yeah.
And then at some point it just became a thing that people would reference in like rap videos, and I think Crocs will make the same trajectory, and in 2 years we're gonna see amazing Crocs content on the internet.
Well, let's see.
Well,
Time is
I'm
yet
a
to prove
Croc.
that.
No, I don't have any Crocs. I can pretend now that I do. Should get some probably now before they turn into like 150 euro fashion items.
Yes. So that's the real question. It's like, do people see things at prices, or do you see things at prices?
Man, yeah, my brain is fucked. I have the Discogs median price brain worms.
Yes.
Don't go down the route, children.
No, but I think that's wonderful. Generally, I'm never on Discogs. I like to buy stuff in the record store. You go there, you listen to the stuff, or like secondhand stuff, as you introduced me to it, basically. But other than that, I don't really order records online.
Yeah,
but you
good.
should, kids, for sure.
Yeah, the thing is that especially now, since I'm like in like a more special interest kind of field, like especially being into the whole UK shit, and also reaching the limits of my storage at the moment.
Yes.
You know, I also have become more careful in what I buy, and the times where I'd go to the flea market and buy like 30 random records because they look electronic are also kind of over, sadly.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing is that also now, especially that I'm buying more UK stuff of that you just, even if you're extremely optimistic, are very rarely gonna find here. Like you're not gonna find a Jungle collect, or you're maybe rarely gonna find a Jungle collection here.
Yeah.
I was actually lucky once. I met a dude. Not gonna go into too much detail, but I met him on the flea market, because that's my social media, flea market. And he had like a lot of this sort of interesting 90s, a bit of also the Café Del Mar vibe, you know, like sort of the trip hop and the chill stuff, and a lot of Jazzanova and that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And I love that, you know. I used to listen to like a lot of Kruder Dorfmeister, DJ Vadim, DJ Cam, all this trip hop stuff. Been really into it. And so I saw he had a crate of this, and just out of interest, I thought I'd ask him, you know, yeah, do you maybe have some like jungle drum and bass? I was like, yeah, man, I have them at my home, just pass by. So he gave me his like contact information. I passed by his place. Also, first of all, beautiful apartment. Secondly, turned out he was actually quite involved in like the Berlin late 90s lounge scene. You know, he was also an artist. He made some music.
Yeah.
And was still extremely involved in like a completely different scene. I'm not going to go super specific, but let's just say he had a kind of Elvis type haircut now.
Okay.
And he had like sort of 2-3 shelves in his shelves only with like old drum and bass jungle records, and I spent an entire day at his place in his beautiful apartment just listening through all of his records that he wanted to get rid of, you know, because he didn't at all listen to them anymore. Overall, his taste was like a bit different than mine, and I think that was kind of as good as it got in terms of you know, finding someone that listens to like jungle drum and bass here. Like a lot of the stuff he had was kind of the kind of drum and bass that is like big room drum and bass that works in Germany, that I know from going to drum and bass parties like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But overall, a lot of the stuff that he had wasn't exactly mine, but he had some amazing jungle, man. Some like original metalhead stuff, some early Dillinger, Goldie. He had a Tom and Jerry record. I know this is not really exactly your field, but I'm just gonna keep throwing out names.
Wait, Tom and Jerry record?
Man, Tom and Jerry. Do you know Four Hero?
No.
It's they have some other pseudonyms. Four Hero is also a pseudonym of Tom and Jerry, or is Four Hero a pseudonym of a guy who's part of Tom and Jerry? Either way, it's two guys.
I'm just thinking cartoons, Tom and
Yeah,
Jerry.
yeah.
You know?
They have on the labels of the records. There's always Tom and Jerry with like joints in their hands. It's,
Okay.
They're amazing, and they're just this series of records. Maybe 15 came out or something.
Yes.
And they're like this extremely sought after, dope jungle stuff, man. It's just amazing, man. It's incredible, like
Okay.
incredible music, and incredibly hard to find. Also, I mean,
Yeah.
it was very sort of popular at the time, but I found one of those records there, and a lot of really beautiful stuff. And that was probably as good as it gets in terms of finding this UK stuff in Germany.
Yeah.
But so that's why, to make the circle, I end up buying more stuff on Discogs these days and less stuff in the wild.
Okay.
Although I would still like to very much buy stuff in the wild. You can still get extremely lucky, especially, as I said, with electronic music. Go out there. The Berlin flea market heads don't know what they're selling
When they open again.
in June.
In 2025.
But yeah, man. I mean, I guess, is that a thing that you often talk about with people here in this context, like the whole pandemic music stuff, or do you try to avoid it just because people already think about it enough?
I don't really have a guideline for it. I mean, it's just like chilling, catching up. But no, I don't think we really. Generally, it's like, okay, what's gonna happen, you know, and how is it gonna look like when it opens again?
Yeah.
It's like interesting for sure. But not necessarily in how the situation. But there is generally no guideline. So if you want to talk about anything
I don't know, man. I don't.
virus related, go ahead.
I'm totally down to avoid this subject and pretend like we're just here in the smoking room of a club, chilling out, and the party's going on heavily next door.
True. Yeah, I think that's a nicer feeling for sure.
Man.
But yeah, since you have been working with records and in record shops, or for record shops in general, some information about, let's say, because this is what I find always interesting. It's like when you first get into vinyl, you just buy stuff, and then at one point you realize like, oh, okay, if the sun, you know, shines too much on a record, it could destroy the record, and a lot of other specific things. But yeah, how do you kind of keep your records safe? Let's say for storage, you know, generally.
I'm not the best person about that, because I mean, generally I'm.
You don't
not,
take care of your records?
I do take care of my records, but I still think of them as like objects that I use, you know?
Okay.
I think sometimes when I fuck up a record somehow, like because I played it a lot,
Yeah.
and then it has a skip somewhere.
Yes.
This is of course a shitty feeling, but on the other hand, I feel like, damn, this record lived. You know, it saw some things. So I'm not a guy who keeps all of his records in like plastic sleeves, and I do have them organized, because otherwise I would lose my mind. But I still think that I mean, the main tip, I guess, is don't play records that you really love when you're kind of drunk.
Okay.
Like there should be a time where just play records that are like 70% important to you, or that you can replace. But overall, I think I'm definitely for using records. I mean, one thing, don't get them too dirty and then play them again. Like, clean your records regularly. That's already, like, sometimes you think, oh, I fucked up a record, and then you clean it once and it sounds like new, you know? Like, a lot of the times, also when I sell records to people through the internet,
Yeah.
sometimes I forget to clean them, and then people are like, "Oh shit, this sounds like ass," and I'm like, "Yo, put some cleaning solution on it
Yes.
and try it out once," and then usually it fixes everything. Like 90% of the stuff, of the issues you have with the record, especially if you bought the record new yourself, are gonna be solved by cleaning it.
Okay.
But of course, also keep liquids away from your records. Um, don't drip beer on it or whatever. Oh, a funny story of our man Zips that that I can tell here maybe. We were at his place and I had just gotten a copy of Deep Inside, as we were talking about earlier, the
Yes.
hard drive, right?
Yes.
Yeah. From Mauerpark. I think I paid like a 20 for it and I was like so happy about it.
Okay.
I was like, wow, I finally got this classic tune.
Yes.
The thing was at that point already another great tip: look at the condition of your records, especially if you're paying money for it. This one had like it looked pretty alright, but it had like a deep scratch at the moment where it goes from only the a cappella Deep Inside to the drums
no.
kicking in. So
Yes.
you couldn't play it. You couldn't mix it in with the Deep Inside and then have it sort of
Yeah.
bang in.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So that's a tip on the side. But yeah, so still on the other side it had a dub, and the dub was still nice. I was fairly content with only playing the dub.
Okay.
And so we were at our man's place, mixing a bit, chilling out, and he made the decision at some point, from an interior design perspective,
Okay.
to put some candles on like pieces of wood above the the Technics.
Okay.
So he had these candles there shining, and it was of course very cozy.
Yes.
But I don't know exactly how it happened. Somehow I think he accidentally knocked over one of the candles, and all the wax went down on the record and into his Techniques as well. The record was of course fucked because, as you already said, sun and heat is just the worst thing for a record.
So wait, candle wax can actually destroy a record?
Yeah, man. Because it's not really the wax itself, could you get that off, but it's the heat,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's so hot. And I think though he also managed to save his Techniques in the end, but he still hasn't replaced my Deep
Okay.
Inside record. Paul, if you hear this, I'm waiting.
I have one copy here.
Yeah,
Yes.
but not two. Now, I actually, in the end, I got like now at the moment I have like a bootleg where it's on
Okay.
which it is, and it was still fine because, given that it had the scratch on the original version, it was still like I would have needed to get a copy from somewhere else at some point, anyways. So it wasn't the most fulfilling copy, anyways, and maybe it was better like
Yes.
that. But yeah, man, don't do that. Don't take your candles away.
Yeah, I don't use a lot of candles, to be honest.
Yeah, same. They're too much work.
Yeah. But actually, the only times that I've bought two records is once to give the second record to a friend, and the other time I think maybe just to practice scratching.
Did you
Because-
manage?
No.
Yeah, same, man.
It is hard. It is really difficult.
I respect that so much, man. I love to be more use that stuff more. Sometimes I still try to mix stuff in with scratching, but that's of course something completely different than actually scratching on a track.
Yes.
Scratching is sort of. I'd love to have these DJ Tool records as well, where it's like, oh yeah, and then you, oh yeah. I'd love to be able to do that, man. But I
But
can't.
do you have the tools? Because I have some records with only like vocals and special effects on them.
I did get some over the years.
Yeah.
I'm also a big fan of just generally sound effect records,
Yes.
because there's all of these weird 70s sound effect records
Yes.
for, that you can just, for people to show their movie projector home videos at home.
Right.
And that's amazing, man. That's such a great feel.
Yes.
And actually, there's some that also look like sound effect records, and in the end, they have like insane synthesizer, 80s ambient tracks on them and shit.
Yeah.
So that's like a whole conversation of its own.
True.
Same with, for example, like aerobics records, man. Aerobics records are the shit.
Yeah.
Like there's so much good boogie disco stuff on like aerobics records, but you don't really see them because there's just like I don't know.
They're overshadowed by the others.
Yeah, for like 5 good ones, there's like 20 terrible ones.
Okay.
But there's a lot of great ones as well. But I have some DJ Tool records, but no, I've never really gotten into it. Also, of course, if you're playing records, you're already under so much stress when you're playing, because you want to match it perfectly. You don't see the BPM on the CDJ,
Yeah.
and then putting like another record on there just for a second to do some scratching because it looks cool and sounds maybe cool.
Yeah.
And then take it off again and then put in the record that you want to mix in. That sounds so stressful.
It does, but it's art, man.
Absolutely no.
Because I've seen the Egyptian Lover.
Man, I think we talked about it at some point like years ago. I saw him
Yes.
too, man.
Because I saw him it was a party organized by I think it was the Coffein parties, one of the Coffein parties at IPSA. And Turkish DJ and also organizer. I was basically heading home and he was like, dude, have you actually seen Egyptian Lover play? I'm like, not really. I haven't seen him like in person play. He's like, dude, I know, because I said, I'm tired. I need to get some food. I'm going home, He was like, you need to wait. You need to see this dude play. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to grab something to eat then, like a falafel, and I'm going to be right back. So I went out there, got myself some falafel, came back, and I saw this dude play vinyl only to start with. And he was scratching.
Man.
And he was like playing basically the breaks, the good stuff from record, and looping it. Like he was looping on vinyl, you know what I mean? Like
Man.
playing the same thing
Yeah.
and then breaking it down. And at one point, he got so insane that he started like reversing the record with one hand while putting the other record on the other turntable and mixing and cueing the track in.
Yeah.
And he did beat matching that way, and it sounded amazing, but it was it's impossible,
Yeah, man. Man, I saw him once. I never actually saw him at a party, and I heavily regret that. I mean, luckily he's still alive.
Yes.
So
That was everyone.
that was me knocking the table. But I saw him once at an in-store at Russia when I was living in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And together with James Pants as well, who also did some cool shit. But man, he did just that routine. He played some amazing records, but then also just did exactly that rewinding and scratching with the other one. And it sounded like the record was playing, but he was just moving it by hand.
Yes.
And yeah, man, I'm very often thinking of the words of the Egyptian Lover. What is a DJ if you can't scratch? What is a DJ if you can't rap? What is a DJ if you can't scratch? Because I can do it all, baby, just like that. But I still think, like, I mean,
Yes.
I'm cool with not rapping, but I should definitely, like, what kind of a DJ am I if I can't scratch?
Yes.
So
And that's the thing. And
Yeah.
he takes the mic and starts rapping then.
Yeah.
And at that show, he actually took the 808 and had and the funny thing, it had it just had the power plug-in and the mono, like one plug.
yeah.
And it was amazing. And he was just like holding it in his hand, basically playing with it. And it was so amazing. And
What a G.
yes, definitely. He's
Man, he's definitely
He's
when
a
I was
master.
when I was talking earlier about like the kind of 808 sound, the hip hop stuff that kind of ended up introducing me to electronic music. That he's definitely one of the greatest of this sound.
yes.
Just because he kept true to this sound as well. Like I think like 3-4 years ago, my roommates gave me a sort of fairly recent Egyptian Lover album, and it still sounds like that. It still bangs.
Yes.
He still plays this kind of stuff at his shows, and I absolutely respect him for that. It's it doesn't. He doesn't need to change because he just hit the exact perfect formula, and he's so good at it, man. He's
Yes.
so technically good at it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing. I think for a lot of the new generation DJs, not in Berlin necessarily, but the virtual generation of DJs, let's say, with a lot of tools and a lot of digital stuff, taking out the analog vibe of it, basically. And I think that's very interesting to see a legend like that play and actually really get inspired, for me personally, to do stuff, to know my stuff better.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, in the end, it's like you're walking kind of a line. Also, for example, for someone like me who, until maybe, generously, I'd say a year ago, but even in the last year, I didn't play so much digitally, but who until a year ago pretty much only played vinyl, and now that we have the label and we did the releases and stuff, and we have all of this, I have all of this unreleased stuff that I want to play at a party sometimes. I still, before that, I only played records, and I was super content with it. I was never really on board with the kind of, oh, this is the pure way to do it kind of vibe. But I still think, I do still like it very much playing with records.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sometimes as a sort of vinyl DJ, it felt like you had to, or, you don't want to be part of this kind of pseudo culture where it's like, yeah, man, everyone is just beat matching and pressing sync these days. There's a craft to it. Have you ever heard of Cool Herc or something like that?
Yeah.
Or whatever, Sven Väth, who only plays if you want him to play your record, you have to cut a dub plate or something.
Yeah.
Which, whatever, I respect that. If I was that age, I wouldn't want to learn how to use anything else anyways.
Yeah.
Shouts out to Sven Väth, maybe? I don't know. Whatever. Whatever. So, but still, I think I really, like, my main access to vinyl and my main point of connecting with it is that for me it's just a great way to dig. And I feel like, as I said, like, because you go somewhere, you find records that you probably wouldn't find if you keep searching the same online things that other people are searching. Yeah. Because it's just like a random place where there's a random collection or assortment of records, and anything could be there. That's what I like about it. But there's so many like, I'm not a vinyl sound guy at all. For example, I'm not, like, if you've ever organized a party with record players, that's playing at a party with records isn't, like, it might sound good, but if you manage to set it up properly, but there's so many things that can go wrong with record players.
Definitely. Yeah.
Especially in terms of the isolation and stuff, and you can get some shitty frequencies in there, and there's so much stuff that's just so complicated. And in like 90% of the times that I played anywhere in a club setting with records, it sounded good. The more professional, the better it sounded, of course. But still, a lot of the times, there were issues that you wouldn't have had if you would just play digitally.
True.
And especially even just for that alone, I shouts out to everyone not giving shit about vinyl. Absolutely. 2 hours into the podcast where we only talk about vinyl.
No, but the thing is, there are two sides of the thing. So you also have, like, the digital people, let's say, who hate on vinyl only DJs because they're like, oh, okay, you're so cool, you only play vinyl, da da da. You know what I mean? And then there's, like, the vinyl DJs hating on the digital DJs, like, okay, you're not good enough to play like vinyl, or you're not really interested in it, and it sounds so much better on vinyl. But I think, music is music. It's a device that plays it. Vinyl is pressed on physical carrier, basically, and the other one is just digital.
Yeah, something that I... sorry, not to interrupt you. Go on.
You totally interrupt me there. No, but I'm just listening a bit to our surrounding. I hear some banging. I think that's just like the club speakers going on. Someone's playing like a heavy, heavy deep track.
Damn, man, should we go back to the dance floor? No, but just one thing I wanted to say that I like about records is that I have a big digital collection of tracks, and I just lose overviews so quickly. Yeah, there's so many tracks that I've downloaded like 8 years ago and never played a single time anymore. Yes. And I think with records that happens to you more rarely. Like, it's kind of, to me, a sign that I really want a record, that if I really want a track and I want to play it out, I buy it, because then I don't forget about it, Yeah. And that also, of course, leads to me being less flexible with my DJ sets. You know, like sometimes if someone will ask me for yo, I need you to play a wedding, and we only want dancehall. You know, if I was only like if I was a DJ that only played digital stuff, I would probably be able to just chuck together a playlist of dancehall tunes and do that. But given that I don't really have so many I have a bunch of dancehall records, and I'm pretty sure that I might at some point become a dancehall guy. Like, I'm just glad not to get into the deep reggae stuff yet. I feel like that's definitely an old white guy thing that I will still do at some point. But still, like I'm less flexible, of course, in some ways. And if I, for example, will play a house set, then I will still there'll still be an overlap. Whereas, for example, some people from our crew, you know, they do a lot of digging and they, you know, dig up, find a lot of music.
Yeah.
And they'll play a set 2 weeks apart, and they'll play completely different tunes.
Yeah.
But to me personally, the danger that I would have would be that I just forget about some tunes, you know.
Yeah.
And if you buy them on a record, you're probably not going to forget about them.
True, I think, because that's the thing. If it's like digital, it's already kind of stored in your computer or laptop. So that means you need to turn the computer on in the first place to actually see them. But the records you can always physically already see in your room or like in your storage room.
Yeah.
There.
Like, for example, you're going to stumble over a record, you know, you're looking for something, then you're like, oh, what was this again?
Yes.
And that doesn't really happen so much if you just type in the name of a digital tune into a search field. But whatever. It's, as I said, I try to really stay away from the vinyl fetishization. So overall, yeah. What's good? How about you? How have you been?
Well, good. Just chilling. You know how it is.
Keeping it mellow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the nice thing what I like with just playing with USBs is transport.
Yeah,
because
man.
I can't go to a gig on my bike, you know, with a huge bag of or 2 bags of records. So I would have to take a taxi. But if I just play USBs, literally you just have the USB or 2 USBs and you have your headphones. And that's all you need.
Man, that's amazing. Like in the year of our Lord 2019, for example, when we were doing quite a few open airs.
Yeah.
And also parties, I was always the guy not only supplying my own records, which I of course had to bring in like a big and heavy backpack, but I was also always the guy to bring the turntables.
Yes.
Because no one else wanted to pass on their turntables, and I was, pretty much the only person who was really taking advantage of them. There's still some people in our collective that play a lot of records.
Yeah.
But I was at the time the only record exclusive playing dude.
Okay.
And so, man, I like imagine carrying like 2 turntables and a huge amount of records on your back.
Yes.
To some random really far out place in the
Yes.
outskirts of Berlin, man. I properly fucked up my back that year. That was heavy. Maybe it was good that 2020 wasn't an open air year for us, at least, because we didn't. My back is probably thankful for that, man. That was heavy, definitely. And
Yeah.
of course, also another thing, especially with open airs, but also in clubs, is that you're just gonna fuck up your records, not only from scratching them up or whatever, but if you play an open air and it's dope and it's dusty, your records are gonna be fucked.
Yeah.
And if you play in a club and it has like a fog machine or whatever, and it's sort of dusty and whatever, it's still gonna, leave some gunk and residue. So I think, as I said, like I see records like headphones sometimes, like it's just something you use and you wear them out, and then if you fucked it up, you just gotta get it new.
Yeah. I feel you.
But yeah, it's still like there's some records that I have at home that I have like 3 copies of, not because I want to sell them, but just because I'm certain that I'm gonna fuck the 1 copy up so bad over the years.
Yeah.
And maybe at some point I want to give one away to a friend.
Yes.
And then I still have one left for when I'm old and rusty to mix in my Facebook live stream in 2040 for my 3 friends.
Yeah, I think that's nice. But that's nice, the gift side of it, though, as well. Like,
Definitely. It's also great about wanting to get rid of records, because
don't go there.
no, I mean not selling them, but like
No, but
when I have a bunch of records and I'm like, oh shit, I gotta reduce my records a bit, and I'm like, oh yeah, I like this track, but you know who'd like this track even more?
I
It's
know,
my
but
mate X.
yes, but you actually don't really like this track anymore. You're kind of really trying to get rid of the record.
I don't know. I wanted to give you this this Habibi record,
Yeah,
and that's a dope record. I still have it now.
Yeah,
But I thought
Amar Diab.
exactly, man, that's a dope record.
That is. I do have it.
I know that's why
Uh,
you didn't take it.
Yes. True. But that's a different kind of. Yes, that's a different kind of present. This is the thing. I think I've got a couple of times maybe records, and in a weird way, people said we want to get rid of this record, as in okay, it doesn't really fit them, but without really thinking like, hey, Yusuf would really like this record. So I listened to them and they didn't sound good. I'm like, dude, why the fuck are you giving me shit records?
And I have this shelf in my room where also like because I always go through this process. I have records lying around in my room and I want to listen to them a few times before I properly put them in my collection. Because I don't want to not know them. I want to sort of be aware of what I have in my collection.
Okay.
And sometimes when I do that, it's like, well, yeah, this is pretty good, and I could imagine keeping this. But I think maybe Paul, for example, would really like this. Like I have a bunch of trance records in a shelf where a lot of them I was thinking maybe I should give that to Paul or, my man Young Lychee Bob,
Yes.
or you maybe probably as well. So I have this whole shelf with records where I'm like, yeah, this is for mates. This is too good to not keep, but also I can't just keep putting records in my room, man. So but I never really marked them what is for who. So now I just have this shit, these records there that I have no idea who to give to, and I gotta listen to them again and check them out and
put stickers on them.
Exactly, I gotta put some stickers on them.
Yeah.
So if you want some records, hit me up.
Sure, if you have some nice house records.
Yeah, man, I
always nice.
definitely have some that will fit your bill. I mean, the Amar Diab was of course an absolute sure shot, but
true.
Do you play that out some back when people used to play out records? Did you play that out sometimes?
Yeah.
Was it like a signature thing?
No, it wasn't. The thing is,
the Shaz Deep Dub, right?
Well,
we can listen to it later and discuss what's the best
I think
mix.
there is only one actual playable house track I found.
Yeah.
Like it sounded a bit more like a classic house track.
Yeah.
But it isn't the most interesting house track either.
Yeah.
And I
if
didn't
it
want
wasn't for the vocal.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I didn't want to, let's say, just for the sake of the vocal, to mix it somewhere where it doesn't really belong. And I have other records that are way more interesting that I would like to play instead. But I did mix it in a couple of times. Yeah, but it hasn't become a signature thing. But this is an interesting thing also, it is like Egyptian singer, Amar Diab, that I've been also listening to back in the days in Iraq.
Oh, really?
Because like he was super popular. So we had like cassettes, of him listening in the car. But I wonder if that release is actually an official release or kind of a random, bootleg kind of release with his name, because he is a huge dude.
I felt like it was an official thing, because otherwise, like, you don't really see so much. You don't see like a Fairuz bootleg, although there should be probably. There probably are some dope Fairuz house bootlegs, but I think that one looked, since it was also featuring Amar Diab and it was on a proper label, I think as well.
Yeah,
I felt like that was an official release. Like maybe him also trying to cash in a bit on the deep house trend.
Yes.
Which I respect.
Yes.
But no, of course that's often the question, like the classic scenario: is it actually a legit sample? Did someone make it or?
Yes. Yeah, and that's still the copyright thing. And I think, to be honest, that we should be doing a bit more research into that. I want to talk to someone who really knows everything about copyright.
Man, I think that would be a great guest for a podcast. Someone who's like a copyright lawyer. I don't know if I should tell it. We had this plan with some friends to also start something that's something like an advocacy group, because there's so much shitty stuff going on with bootlegs and reissue labels, and there are of course a lot of legit and fair reissue labels, but there's also a lot of stuff that goes on in that direction where people who don't really know exactly what the standard of the industry is get told like, yo, we're gonna do a repress of your record, and you're gonna get a few £100, and people are like, whoa, nice, okay, a few £100 for nothing. And then, they press up like 2,000 copies and make quite a bit of money off of it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying people shouldn't make money with reissues, but I do think that the original artist should be fairly paid, especially given what we were saying earlier, that all of this, Discogs hustling and records becoming sought after long after they're released isn't really benefiting the artist at all.
Yeah.
So I think there should be a kind of mechanism in the industry that allows the customer to distinguish what is actually a fair reissue, what is a bootleg, and what is totally, legit to buy and what isn't,
Yeah.
Because obviously, I mean, I guess it's comparable to stuff like fair trade or putting bio on your food, like people want to be ethical buyers these days, and I have my personal problems with this sort of individualized responsibility kind of philosophy of dealing with societal problems.
Yes.
But I still think that it would be important in this field of music, which is sort of limited in a way, to have maybe a way for people to distinguish what might be legit and what might not be. So we were thinking to sort of start like a sort of non-profit situation, which labels can basically consult and they'll get something like a stamp of approval.
Yes.
But that's of course a really far-fetched thing, because record shops, online record shops, and to an extent also labels, they make money in spite of the rights situation. The only people who are actually damaged if shit doesn't go fairly are the original artists, and people will still buy the reissue,
Yeah.
So it's quite a difficult area in the end. I think I would definitely still like to know way more about this whole copyright situation, but back in the days, I was a music writer for different a bunch of magazines.
Yes.
And I wrote 2 pieces for Groove at the time about reissues and the stuff behind it, and kind of the stuff that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And I was interviewing also some people who run reissue labels, some of whom wanted to be on record and some who didn't want to be on record. And overall, a sentiment that they also said was that, or that they were, a part of, is that you have these vague rules, behind who owns copyright to what.
Yes.
And they're in a way, of course, benefiting from it, but also, as you said earlier, like some labels might be closed, some artists might be dead, some it might be extremely difficult to find the original rights owner,
Yeah.
and sometimes you might have the entire band which is kind of not findable, and then you have like the producer or the drummer or the engineer or one random person who was a part of the original recording, who then might sign off that they're liable and that they sort of own the rights.
Yeah.
And so the fact that this situation is kind of lax often is the only way to still put out this music, because people die and their families might not be findable. Not everyone is on social media.
That is true.
But whatever. That's to me a really interesting field. Like
Yeah,
reissues
it
and
is.
stuff.
It is. I think definitely interesting, and I think it is very complicated. But it also comes down to contracts between the artists and the labels, and
Yes.
mostly the contracts are written in such a way that the label can cover their costs. Any additional money that can be made then would be split, but the artist doesn't really get much.
Mm.
So I don't think it's very fair for the artists, but for the record label, if it's like a small record label kind of thing, it's also not like it's not a lot of money generally. So I think then
Yeah.
the main idea is to put out music. But yeah, I think it's actually a great idea to have that, let's say, kind of stamp that you get that this is approved in a way that this music is legit, and the actual composer and the people involved who are the legit copyright owners benefit from the
Yeah.
whole deal.
There was this. The reason why we thought of this was that because there was this sort of famous case at the time, like maybe 2015, 2016, 2017, I don't know, where sometime around then, where there was this label that put out a lot of reissues of like Nigerian funk stuff,
Yeah.
were accused of making shitty contracts, and there was this whole other thing about the owner also owning like a vaguely Nazi-related label, but that's a whole nother story.
Okay.
We don't need to talk about. That's a whole nother thing. Whatever. So they were basically accused of making shitty contracts with original artists or the remaining relatives of the original artists.
Yeah.
And what they were accused of, and something they didn't deny. I don't know what actually happened, of course, but they didn't deny that they made contracts with the people where the label didn't only license the album for, okay, we're going to press 1,000 copies of that now, here's the money. But they paid them like a few €100 to buy the rights forever.
Yeah.
To like just, buy the rights to distribute them whenever, however, wherever they want. And that just sounded extremely fucked up to me, Like if you're in a position where you might not be where a couple of €100 are just quite a bit of money to you, and then you're probably going to sign a lot of stuff. And I feel like obviously it wasn't illegal because the other people signed the contract.
Yes.
But I think especially with this sort of cozy small scene of reissue labels, there should come some sort of responsibility towards the original artists, because it's just it's so fucked up if you made some album, it's like some time ago, and then it ends up touching so many people's lives over the years, and all you get from it at some point is like €200 for your nieces and nephews to give up their rights to your music forever.
Yes.
That's just shitty.
Yeah, that is a shitty situation for sure, and that's why I think it would be for sure interesting to have someone.
Yeah, man, get a
really-
lawyer on here.
Yeah, well, but is a lawyer the right one for this? A lawyer who specialized in music copyright, or just copyright in general?
Probably.
Who are we? Or just copyright expert? A copyright consultant.
Well, probably it would at least be interesting to talk to someone who has done a lot of licensing deals on already. Like I really don't know how this kind of stuff works.
Someone who already has done like a lot of licensing deals could have done them
In a shitty way.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we need to have someone who's really looking at it from a different kind of perspective and knows this stuff. But I think we'll figure something out.
But on the other hand, this sort of counteracts what I said like an hour ago about I'll just sample anything, man. I don't give a shit.
No, but that's the thing. I think, but again, you haven't put it out, as in
Yeah,
you
that's
are
true.
not earning any money from it, and I think generally you're trying to do something about it, But I think sometimes in the moment you have this record, you're just gonna sample it because you're in the groove and you're inspired by the original record, so you are allowed to make your own version of it. That's not.
No.
That's nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
I definitely agree that, you know, there's some people that I go to their gigs, not, or back in the days when gigs were a thing, I went to their gigs not because necessarily I like their DJ skills or whatever, but because I knew that they just had all of these crazy edits that they made themselves that are never going to see the light of day because it's like a Spice Girls edit or whatever.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know. But there's just, I think that's just a great thing to do, and that's also something to get back that you just can't really do on vinyl unless you're willing to blow like 40 euros to cut a dub plate of something here or there,
Yes.
which I'm not really.
But this is the thing. The interesting thing about the dub plates, the machines that make them are not too expensive.
True.
So
True.
so
You want to
that's-
get one? Should we throw together?
we could. Would be
Um,
nice to start something up where a lot of people can just press their stuff.
It is true. There's this. I saw this documentary. I don't know if it was from Noisy or something like that about this guy in the UK who does dubplate for all these people. Like he has this. I think we at some point were talking about this record. Ah, shit. What's the guy's name? Piano guy from Yusuf Kamal as well. Oh, I will cut this out maybe. there's this amazing London house record
Yes.
where which I really love, and I watched this documentary then, and they're talking to this guy who did a dub of this as well,
Yeah.
and he's like talking about how he's like literally the only guy who has a copy of this thing apart from Henry Wu. Henry
yes, of
Wu
course.
is who I
Dude,
was referring to, and
I love Henry Wu.
yeah, man. Although I did read some shitty stories about him on Twitter, but let's not get into it.
I just know him for his music. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah, no,
lock on that. I'm not.
I'm mind
I did
poisoned.
not hear anything
I'm
you said just
poisoned.
before.
but no, I think generally like I love dubs, and I also I really love the idea of the like VIP mix, you know, like that you put out a track and then you make a special mix of it
Yes.
that you cut on a dub plate for like 10, 20 people,
Yeah.
and you give it to only your DJ friends that you respect,
Yes.
and they have like the special remix version that is kind of similar but not so much.
Yeah.
You know, you have that a lot with like jungle and hardcore and stuff. And there's all of these sort of rare VIPs that, oh, they played that at Fantasia 1993 New Year's Eve edition. And, and so those dubs sometimes become more legendary than the original tunes because sometimes they're just better, you
Yes.
know. And I think that's generally something that I really love. Some of the tunes that I put out, I did a dub, but usually I send it to people and they're like, "No, man, the original is way better. I'm gonna keep playing the original."
Yeah. Well, depends. I mean, sometimes I like the original. Sometimes I just like the dub. But I think if you connect with the first version, most likely the second version is not gonna work out for you.
Yeah,
You know, because then that's the favorite, and then if you hear it in a different jacket, then you're like, I actually really like this one.
yeah, no, absolutely. No, but generally, I think the whole dub plate thing is pretty dope. I'd love to just sometimes cut like a few dub plates
Yes.
of a few tunes, but somehow haven't really done it yet.
Yeah.
But maybe we should get the machine going. What they're like a few thous, or what?
I thought I looked at it. It was around 5K. I think if you get like decent stuff, it could be around 10K. If you want to do it a bit more professionally.
Yeah, the thing is, in the end, I'm not really so much of like an audiophile, you know. I like good sounding music, you
Yes.
know, but I was pretty much never in the position where I had the equipment at home that I would hear like the difference between an MP3 and a FLAC, you know.
Yeah.
Which of course, being a vinyl DJ, it's probably sacrilegious. But I was never so much of a sound guy. So I think we should get someone like Bob on board because he's like a big sound guy.
Okay.
I'll show him a track that I really like, and he's like, "Well, yeah, but those hi-hats, man, they're like a bit stingy."
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I don't know. Are you a big sound guy? Are you like a big audio engineering person?
Nope. No, I just like making tracks. But when it comes to audio and being like a super sophisticated listener. Well, like actually to hear big differences, I'm not there.
Yeah.
I had like a lot of times where this is the thing about like Martine V.
Hmm.
She has excellent hearing. Every time I walked with her into a club, she would point out something about the sound that I simply almost couldn't hear or start hearing after concentrating for like half an hour, you know? But yeah,
And I really respect that, but there, on the other hand, I sometimes just am very glad or feel kind of thankful that I haven't really gone down that route too far yet. You know, even though of course I produce stuff myself, and sometimes I'll show it to someone and they're like, "Well, yeah, it's, sound wise that's totally off." But I think overall sometimes I'm sort of grateful that I'm not too much of an audiophile in that direction, because I'll still appreciate some tracks that maybe some other people won't appreciate because of the sound, you know?
yes.
So
I have the same feeling about that.
I think we were talking about it earlier today about you hearing a track and liking a kind of idea, and maybe it's not perfectly done, you know, it's not perfectly developed, the idea,
Yeah,
but still liking it. I think that's often to do with like mixing and how it's crafted in the end.
yeah,
So there's all these tunes where you're like, wow, this is such a catchy melody, but the kick is just mixed so shittily you could never play it out. But
yeah.
I'm glad that I can still like these tracks.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Those are, but this is then a bit more, you're seeing the tracks as ideas. And I like that because I got a lot of stuff also submission wise, which can have sometimes very great ideas. Sometimes they miss the finishing touch, and then I'm put in a very difficult position to make a choice, but also related to like time pressure basically, because you cannot like wait for 2 weeks to actually decide. You need to make the decision because, you know, it's a premiere, the record's coming out.
Yeah, no, for
So
sure. I was gonna ask you about that, because of course these days, given that, you know, we're doing this whole 160 BPM kind of area, 150, 170
yes,
electro revival, ghetto house influenced music stuff.
yeah,
And we at some point also started doing premieres. We also, of course, get quite regularly requests. I'm obviously far from the amount you do, and obviously far from reaching the amount of people you do, but given the niche that we're in, we still quite regularly get requests, and
yeah,
we have at this point become, I guess, someone that quite a few people ask for premieres. And it's tough, man. It's difficult.
yes,
Like, of course, there's this whole social aspect where you're kind of belong to the same scene as someone else, and you want to do them the favor.
yeah,
And on the other hand, there's this whole aspect of, you know, do I really like any of the tracks?
yeah,
And there are definitely a lot of releases where I'm like, well, yeah, I like this, and this track. And then there's a bunch of releases where I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to do them the favor, but none of them really catches me.
yeah,
And then there's, of course, all the people who aren't really even, who you don't really see as part of the scene because they're not like big or whatever, or quote unquote big. I mean, to me, someone with like a few hundred SoundCloud followers is big
yeah,
because we're in this weird niche. And then you hear these tracks and they're exactly that, you know, they're like great ideas, they have great elements, but also they're just not finessed exactly. But you
Yeah.
don't really, you can't just give everyone extremely detailed feedback as well if you get like 2 premiere requests a day, which
No.
to you is probably still little, but you know what I mean.
Yes, definitely. So I think the main idea is to actually never go for doing someone a favor, because you can still communicate it in another way to. That's the thing. You basically motivate people to, if it's not going to work out this time, it's probably going to work out next time.
Yeah.
You know, because we want to motivate, or I want to motivate people to keep on doing music and make more tracks. Generally, I think
Yeah.
that's nice, and I would always like to listen to the next premiere, and that's kind of what I also say in the email. And I don't go in too much into the feedback because then I can't keep up with all the emails. If I would give detailed feedback, like time-wise, it's not possible. that's one of the reasons why I also took out the repost section for the mixes, because then I would have to listen to at least 1 hour mixes to repost, which then, like, time-wise is just not doable generally with the amount of submissions that come in. Or I need to.
What do you mean repost mixes section?
So let's say I have this submission form. And that's also something that actually helped quite a lot.
We started one as well.
Yeah, so people can submit their stuff, and I had a section, or generally with email, people would ask for like a repost for the mix.
Okay, yeah.
But if I repost anything on the channel, I'm gonna listen through all of it.
Definitely.
And I want it to be good quality, you know. So if I would get, let's say, more than 12 requests a day for mixes, then I would have to listen at least 12 hours a day to mixes, but that's basically the whole day, so it's not possible.
Yeah, man, I totally feel you. And I think the reposting thing, at some point we decided we're only also going to do in fairly rare occasions, just because if you repost one thing, even if you really like it, then it's shitty for someone else who you didn't repost, you know, and who might have approached you for something.
Yeah.
But also one thing we at some point realized, given that we're kind of a big group, you know, we're like 8 people.
Yeah.
And we all have our individual things going on separate to the collective.
Yeah.
That we also kind of at some point decided, we like being a platform to an extent, you know, we like taking our audience or whatever you want to call it and sharing it with other people that we respect and that we want to have some of the, you know, that we want to pass on to the people who might not have heard about them, like give a stage to someone kind of. But on the other hand, this is us, you know, we're this collective, and we should put some emphasis on us doing things as well. So at some point we just thought, okay, whatever, we're just gonna repost everything that we do, like as individual members as well. Like even if, for example, our member Zombie, you know, who does sort of hip hoppy stuff as well, does like a hip hop track, we're also gonna repost that, even if it doesn't really fit the exact bill of what people like, because we're like the collective and we're not like the sound, you know. Like we have people that play kind of 125 electro stuff all the time. We have people that play like 180 breakcore gabba shit all the time, and overall it makes more sense for us to like use this audience and attention to take you know, to put attention on us rather than trying to sort of represent a big scene in a way. You know, I still think we still want to use our audience and use the public that we have, which is, you know, small, but whatever, to draw attention to great artists.
Yeah.
But at some point also you just have to, you can't draw attention to every single artist that deserves it, you know?
No, but I think it's also like a decision you have to make. It's like, what do you want to reach with this whole thing, and what is it about? And I think in the collective's way, the whole mission is to have a collective and to do your stuff, to share your music, basically. Like it started with the, let's say, making the accounts or creating the accounts for the Griesmüller takeover. But yeah, I think Berlin house music in that kind of scenario is more based on community.
Of course, yeah.
Because it's basically based on submissions of people. I'm just trying to find the best, well, not the best, let's say, the house that I like the most.
No, I think you're doing a great job with that. I think you're like, for example, I follow a bunch of people on YouTube who upload music, and I don't really click on a lot of them anymore because a lot of them upload a lot of stuff, and I still always click on your stuff because I know it's gonna be quality.
Nice.
Because I think that you've kept the quality high, you know, even if you're, you know, trying to maintain sort of a platform that is open for many people, and I think that's a great balance to have. But yeah, for us, it's sort of trying to keep balance between being a platform and being like a collective of individual artists.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, it was almost almost pretty much almost a year ago. Like
Yeah.
I think Griezmüller was 27th of January, maybe
Okay.
20.
And what day is today?
Don't say that; it's gonna age the podcast. This is whatever day you're listening to it, dear friend. Well, yeah, man, I had a blast. We haven't chatted in a while.
Yes.
I'm glad that we did that with all of you listening.
True. Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. I think it's very nice just to catch up like this.
It is, man. I miss this.
Same, same. So, do you have any, you know, things that you want to share?
Hey, I don't know when this will come out, but check out Raiders. Raiders Records. We're doing good shit. Check out DJ Fucks himself on all DJ Fucks himself on all the social media sites that you own. Come to my Telegram group. I have amazing news about Corona vaccine. No, I'm kidding. No, I sometimes upload tracks on SoundCloud. Follow me there if you wanna. And I might have a EP with my main man Young Lychee coming out in sometime soon. I don't want to say a date because we're probably gonna miss it. But stay tuned for some shit if you're into up-tempo ish, and you know who to follow. Being All Here, Berlin House Music, the man. Get in on the Habibi Grooves action.
All right. Any shout outs?
Shoutouts to my Raiders fam. I love you all so much. Shoutouts to everyone else that is not included in that fam. You're also fam, and I love you so much. And shoutouts to Habibi Grooves, Yusuf.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shoutouts to Paul,
Oh, yeah.
mainly for putting us in touch.
Yes.
And yeah, let's get together and feel all right. What is
Yes.
a DJ if you can't scratch? Okay, I'm gonna stop.
All right. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and see you next time.